Okay.
Slay!
Hello. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 8, right? Of Slayhouse Review.
That's kind of actually crazy.
That was my first, when I was preparing to start filming and I was preparing the first thing I was going to say in my mind. That's like the first sentence that popped into my mind as well. Like, oh, episode 8, that's like crazy, but I guess
That's
it's
like
not
nuts.
really.
I mean, I guess we have been doing
Has
this
it been like
for
8 weeks? We've read 7 stories.
I mean, I guess it has. How is
guess
that possible?
I mean, I guess there's really nothing inherently special about the passage of time or the fact that we've been.
Right.
Well, I guess there is something special about the fact that we've stayed committed to this for for
That's
almost
very
10
special.
episodes.
Here, I'm just gonna give this.
We've done, I think a pretty good job at remaining consistent, and we will continue to do so.
We will continue to do so. We're just gonna, as long as we can write it out.
Yeah.
With our attention spans, we're gonna do so. And I think we're getting somewhere interesting.
I agree. So today we're covering, this week's story was
Andre Alexis.
Consolation by Andre
Consolation.
Alexis. And Andre Alexis, I guess, was the author of a couple of notable books. I mean, a lot of his books on his Wikipedia page have their own Wikipedia pages.
Oh, that's
so know that's,
Yeah.
That's the mark of an accomplished author. It seems like everybody's kind of obsessed with this book he wrote about a bunch of dogs.
What's it called?
15 Dogs. The cover I recognize.
Oh, Slay!
It's like, do you recognize this?
I vaguely recognize it, but I have not.
It's I guess about
read
a bunch of dogs that, I don't know, get human consciousness. I don't know. It seems very
That's kind of Slay.
like wild. Like what's those
Eileen
books about
Miles
those cats?
also wrote one on the perspective of their dog.
Oh, Slay.
I love when people do that. Wait, the Aristocats?
No, not the Aristocats.
Warrior Cats.
Warrior Cats.
Yes,
yeah,
Slay. Oh my god, of course I was into those. I don't think that's surprising.
That actually is.
Let me know if you think that's surprising.
Does Devin seem like a warrior cat?
Yeah, it was like 4th grade, 5th grade.
Slay.
I won't give you years.
It's absolutely
publicly on the internet, but
your your literary life.
It was during my childhood that these books came out. So
literary imagination. Yeah.
Okay. But I can't pull up the fucking story. Okay.
I mean, he's incredibly accomplished, it seems, but as typically goes with any author who's accomplished anything, I have no clue who this person is. As he was reading this story, because I did listen to, the writer's voice as presented by Deborah Treisman of The New Yorker, as he was reading, as he was reading, and as I was reading the story, I was convinced that this was a gay man. He even, in my opinion, spoke like an older Black gay man, but I guess he has a daughter, but I guess that doesn't really say anything. I mean, gay people can have biological children through any number of hijinks.
Slay. Yeah, I didn't actually. That's actually kind of interesting. I feel like, maybe that does kind of. Maybe it's like the story. Maybe this character is gay male.
Did you? Well, this character also has a daughter.
Oh, true.
Yeah, which is talked about
at
the end. We'll get into the plot in a second.
The fiction.
But I will say, we can just preface talking about all of this with, in the interview that he did do with Deborah Treisman, our lovely friend at The New Yorker.
Hi, Deb.
Hey, Deb. We know
you're watching.
We know you're listening.
We know you like our stuff.
Yeah. Maybe she's the one on Spotify that pops up in listening from Sweden, and she's using a VPN
maybe
to throw us off the
scent.
One
with the Harvard guy, 1, 2, 3.
Stanford fan, yeah.
Brain dead review.
Deborah Treisman.
We didn't say that it wasn't going to be brain dead.
I mean, I think the expectations for the discussion on this are
it's a comedy show.
Yeah, and whether we give you comedy at all or any rousing discussion, the
Fresh
bar
insight.
is always, for me personally, on the floor, and
yes.
I always feel pleasantly surprised when something does emerge.
I feel the
so
same
I go
way.
into this with absolutely no expectations,
much
like I go into reading stories in The New Yorker now with my expectations on the floor.
Right. I mean, you and I have been discussing how the one thing people don't want you to know about doing things is that you just have to do them. And like, this is what this is for us. This is a little exercise in,
I
letting
just love how
go, just
every
doing
time,
things, throwing it out there.
every time you say that sentence, I know it's coming, and it's so lovely to wait for you
Your
to
little
get
smirk.
through. Yeah,
I know.
And I just feel like the more we say it, the more we will be able to
What I'm
incorporate the
trying
belief
to
into our
do,
life,
and actually, just
make things
maybe we
happen
can,
for ourselves by simply doing them and
right? We can
saying
get into
that.
these later, but I think it's a form of manifestation. So
Absolutely.
yeah, we'll tease that.
And
for
I mean,
the end.
have we manifested success for this podcast yet? I mean,
Debatably.
Yeah. Like, define the parameters of success.
You're not eating ramen today.
Exactly. We didn't get a pointed comment about,
which was so slay, by the way.
I also find it a little bit pathetic whenever you are running like a small time production with content creation, and you address like comments, and it's like, well, what you're addressing is literally like the one comment you received.
Right. It
so
makes
it's a
it
little
seem
bit like
yeah.
it's a little too small world.
Right.
But yes, the ramen will be taking a break, and I am perhaps thinking maybe I will leave mukbang content to be,
I think you should actually
a vlog sort of thing.
Yeah,
I
kind of like it, honestly. I just feel like you've been suffering more. It's like,
I know, and maybe
more
we
that
should
you've
do
just been
something differently. Like,
suffering.
maybe you should pepper spray me before we start discussing these stories.
Wait, slay, yeah.
See how outlandish we can get. You pull off my fingernails one by one as we discuss the latest fiction in the New Yorker. Ooh, visceral detail there, huh?
Wait, that would be, we should up the performance aspect of this. But anyway.
Okay, I promise we will discuss this story.
We will discuss.
And I mean, like, the reason why. Oh, and I didn't even mention what I wanted to address with what Deborah Treisman brought up, which seems to be now the pattern with every single interview I read about these stories. The author says, well, I don't typically write autofiction, but I decided to make an exception for this.
And you guys hit me up for the New Yorker, so.
And I'm like, okay, well, if everybody is saying that this is the exception, it seems like, no, actually, we all just are writing directly from our lived experiences.
Which I don't think, why are people afraid to admit about, why are people afraid to admit it?
I know, because it's, a little bit frowned upon. It makes you seem like a hack. But then the other thing that makes me, I don't know, feel kind of valid by people revealing this in their New Yorker interviews is our, like, kind of, or at least my personal insistence on analyzing the author as a person instead of, like, looking just at the story. Like, it is valid in the end because they're here saying that this is, a product of their...
I think it's completely valid.
Yes, I can absolutely speculate on the sexuality of Andre Alexis, which, by the way, I mean, come on, girl, can you get any queenier with a name?
It's so,
like, your name is Andre
very, like,
Alexis.
It's slay. It's
come on,
so
girl.
Slay.
I mean, it is slay, and I will say I feel like he has gay face.
Maybe he's bisexual.
I don't know about
Probably
all that,
not.
Girl. Okay, I mean, there are some other things to talk about with the Deborah Treisman interviews. I think truly, these interviews she does with these authors are becoming more interesting than the stories themselves. Not
because
necessarily
they're funny. Like,
yeah, and just like Deborah Treisman. Like, I seriously think she spends maybe 5 minutes a day doing her job.
Yeah, it's some intern does this, and it's
anyway. Like truly, how easy can someone have it? Like, you run a literary publication, and it's like, okay, this is considered the pinnacle of short story publishing.
She's only 54?
She looks great for 54.
Wow,
actually.
Wait, she's kind of slay.
Okay, we have to print out photos of Deborah Treisman and add her to the shrine.
I mean, look at that.
And I mean, it is kind of, she kind of is giving like a Mal Clooney type of.
She's really actually, yeah. Did you see Succession?
Huma Abedin? No.
She's giving, she looks like that actress. There's an actress on Succession. She looks like that. I won't
just
remember.
Kind of like a bitchy Gen X woman who's.
She's slaying the game, yeah, because she's like.
But what I was saying was
whatever.
like, she must like it's the New Yorker, so obviously people, if you're not actively soliciting stories, like, you will have the top authors just throwing their shit at you because they have a book to promote. So it's like literally you could just like look up any prominent prize-winning author of the last 15 years, like search it in the inbox for the New Yorker story submission email, and you probably, anybody will come up. So it's Deborah Treisman just has to choose one. She doesn't even have to read it. She's like, this will be good enough. And then, skim it over, come up with, what are clearly like interview questions that she thought like
they're kind of ChatGPT interview questions.
Seriously. And like have the author then do all the work to try to struggle with you know,
right.
answering these and coming off like intelligent, capable, so they can sell more books. It's like she really has it made, and I think she's a little bit pissed that we're like onto her.
I think she is. She knows she's getting attention
like,
now.
The jig is up, Deborah Treisman. We're onto you.
And we want a little bit of what you got.
Yeah, and we want a little bit
of. So if you're looking for interns.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it would be really fun. I think the three of us would absolutely get a lot.
We could come up with some really good interview questions.
Yeah, like why don't you let us do it? Why don't you make Slayhouse? Could you imagine Slayhouse Review, the official New Yorker?
Slayhouse Review conducts the after. Stay tuned for the after episode. Like. Discussion with our partner Slayhouse.
The like poor like New Yorker like video content editor. Marco, I think you lingered too much of this discussion on whether or not the author is Jewish, and if we can like like sorry, we actually had to cut about 20 minutes of content because you were hyper fixated on whether or not this author was Jewish. Okay, we've been talking I think for 10 minutes now.
Let's get it going.
And so so this is there's a story about, so some guy, his mom just died of dementia, and the story starts, he's like recounting like, my mom and I got into a violent argument when I was an adult, and I didn't talk to her for 5 years, and then she got dementia and died. Now I feel bad because I'm at her funeral. But while I'm at her funeral, I actually don't really care too much that my mom died. I keep thinking about my dad who died 10 years earlier. And so then we get the backstory on his father, who is from Trinidad. This author is from Trinidad. And his dad like grew up in poverty in Trinidad and like worked really hard to become like a doctor, and then moved to Canada in what seems to be the 60s, correct?
Yes, the late 60s. And his dad, the narrator's dad, this is told in first person. So the narrator's dad and mom met in Trinidad and then moved. They were like high school like lovers or whatever. They were like teen
yes,
romance, whatever. And like this sort of refrain that always comes back is that like the narrator's father told the narrator's mother in Trinidad when they were like 16, 17, whatever, like, I will love you, I'll be with you until we're 90, sitting on the porch somewhere when we're 90.
And yeah, the story touches back on that multiple times. And so yes. But then once the dad starts going to medical school, he starts fucking and sucking.
And this is in the late 60s. We go back to the late 60s, and yes.
And so so the narrator is reminiscing about his parents' marriage, and the one fact that stands out about his parents' marriage is that his dad was always cheating, always fucking around with women, and then eventually eventually with his patients, but it started even before that.
Right.
And his mother like knew the whole time that he was sleeping around on her, and like still stayed with him, and never, this, that, and the third. So anyways,
which we can get into because I thought that was actually brilliantly rendered.
I thought that was probably the most compelling part about the story was the mother and the marriage.
I agree.
And the fucking and sucking. The only thing, and I think I'll just address this right away since I just feel like so much of this 45-minute runtime story is the runtime of the story when it was read aloud by the author, like is literally stuff that you could say for your family reunion. Like it was like very sentimentally like talking about his father or the narrator's father, which I'm sure it's like 1-to-1, how like they were able to overcome adversity and like how do all this, and how they were like a trailblazer in like, small town Canada, being a black man and having a medical. It's like, I've got limited time, King. We can save this for the family reunion.
It was mostly, and I agree, because mostly I think it is just not necessary given
the purpose of the story.
Yeah, and also given the fact that it's like implicitly rendered in like the whole dynamic that like with the husband cheating on the wife when they like encounter the white, like when the narrator as a child encounters the white families that like his dad is cheating on his mom with. So I don't even think it's needed.
And now that we're talking about it, I'm
do
like,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm like, is this being put in here because like the dad cheating on his wife with all of his like white patients is like another aspiration thing, another like deeply rooted like psychological.
I think the question is
like
there.
Is he psychologically motivated to sleep with white women because it's like him being on the climb further up and up? Like he was already able to become a doctor and escape his poverty. Now the next step is sleeping with white women. But I think that's an imposition, and I think Alexis certainly made it clear in his interview with Deborah Treisman, like, this story does not really have a racial reading to it. Like, the race aspect of it is, in the background, not
Right.
necessarily the foreground. The foreground of it is this man loves sucking and this man loves fucking.
Right. Which I think it's interesting because it the detail, the texture that it adds, like to include all of this sort of like long history, backstory, like does it advance the world building itself? Yes, which is cool. But that's why I thought, oh, this is definitely a novel excerpt because not all of those like thematic landscapes were exploited in the story, and they weren't even necessary to the central conflict of this story per se.
And
It's not
it's
like
weird because this is not a novel excerpt. This is going to be in a story collection. But
right.
after reading a little bit more about Andre Alexis, something about him, I don't know, provoked me into investigating him a little
Yeah,
bit deeper than anybody else that we've kind of covered. Is he's like a big Canada writer. Like his whole thing is growing up in Ottawa and living in Toronto. And I guess like all of his books and all of his writing kind of like revolves around Canada as
right.
like a
This is sort of like
concept.
a place
So
kind of
yeah,
writer. I
and
think that
it's like, I guess
checks out.
when you're old and you've had a lot of work put out there, like I guess like any short story you may or may not run in a magazine then becomes like a part of a tapestry of like your career,
Yes.
your oeuvre,
Yeah.
and
So
so it's like
even
even if
though
it doesn't serve the purpose of the actual thing, like it serves the purpose of your
yeah, in the larger
larger output.
tableau, right.
But at the same time, it's like time and place, mama. Like I don't need this right now.
Yeah, I think
You know?
we're yeah, like ultimately circling on, which I think we can discuss in terms of the mechanics of the story, is like there's too much exposition that is just not needed really
And
like
this is just
for this exploration of like a really well
something
rendered
like the
relationship.
more and more that I'm reading, and I'm reading a lot these days, it's like it's infuriating to me that like all of these like old established writers are like given all this space in the world to just,
Yeah, to
fart in the wind, and everybody loves it and laps it all up because they're old and they've published many things before. So clearly everything they must say must be so fucking brilliant. And we must allow them to, take up like 45 minutes of my time.
exactly.
I really actually did not dislike this story that much, but this is a larger issue with literary fiction that I'm encountering now that I just, is starting to really
Yeah, because
grind
they
my
don't.
gears.
They're just. I mean, ultimately, I think it's like they're just like allowing people to sort of self-advertise the New
Yeah, like
Yorker in this space,
truly.
which is like okay, great if you're like that person, but for the rest of us and for like the concept of a literary magazine, that's why
Who
it's like not a
enjoys
literary
this?
magazine. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah,
and
exactly. It's
yeah,
very much like, think a magazine that needs to sell magazines for people who read
right.
like magazines.
And you know
And,
what? I actually like very much enjoyed this story, like
oh,
all
sweet.
around.
And you
But
know what? The more that we're talking about it, I actually feel like I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I did on my initial
there were
read.
some really like funny lines in here that I thought were
Yeah, and
like
I did kind of
pretty
enjoy.
fantastic.
Yeah, I enjoyed his like dry,
Yes.
sort of autistic, like voice, and so in I liked how when there was like a funny line, you couldn't really tell if it was like earnest or
Yeah.
not,
I thought
but
that
I
was
think they
great.
were intended to be written as like funny lines, and they really popped through because the rest of this is so sentimental, earnest, and like
Right.
poignant that I think like the bizarre little tidbits we got from the
Right.
narrator were fun.
Right. Like
Um,
it's not impossible that the hooligans had had sex in there as well, referring to
yeah,
the concept that his dad tells his mom, "Oh, the used condom in my office is not actually mine. Somebody broke into the house and like put a used condom in the trash can." And
yeah,
he's like, and the narrator's like, "Well, I guess it's not like impossible," which is like funny. Like it's
yeah.
just like
And he
very
was
funny.
like, I now find the word anemia like intensely erotic
Oh, that was
after,
yeah,
yeah.
that was really
So
great.
to get further into it, so basically, yeah, the dad becomes a doctor and he establishes his own like house call practice in small
It's
town
again late
Ottawa.
'60s, so they're
Yeah,
still
and
doing house calls.
so another thing, and I think that is kind of important to understanding the psychology of this story is the narrator like makes a point early on to say like he didn't feel very like close with his parents because of a year he spent away from them in Trinidad while they set up their life in Ottawa.
Hmm.
And he said like when I came back it was like my parents were strangers to me and we were like kind of like we spent the rest of our lives like approximating each other,
Right.
trying to like,
Which is actually
and it makes sense with the way I think that this narrator goes on to tell the rest of the
yeah,
story.
which I think is actually perhaps some of the like I mean this story is called Consolation, and like in the interview what I found really interesting about this is like the author says like everyone in a way that the narrator, the mother and the father have their sort of like cold comfort. There's sort of like consolation at the end of the day. Like, shit hits the fan. Like the narrator, for instance, never felt close to his parents, but now on their deathbeds, when he is able to like think back to memory, he's like somehow closer to them. So that's his consolation, his memory. His mom like gets vascular dementia and forgets pretty much everything except for a few core memories, including the fact that like her ex-husband, father of the narrator, once said, when we're 90, we'll be sitting together on the porch, which is sad because it's not actually true. That's not what happens to her. But, that's her consolation with dementia. And then the dad, I'm not really sure what his is other than he got to fuck a lot of women, I guess, is sort of what the narrator comes down on. It's like, well, I guess love itself was like my dad's consolation. It's like, oh, that's kind of interesting. But either way, I mean, I think like that is what is interesting about the story is like the family history itself is like sort of the thematic exploration. But that said, I don't think it needed to be because you could do that in a novel. And like with this, I actually was most interested in the dynamic between
and so,
his mother and father as reported.
And so throughout doing these house calls, we then focus in on a particular white family, which his dad is fucking the wife of. And the narrator brings us through like a dinner scene where that couple comes over and has dinner at his house. And that's another reason why I thought this author was gay. When he's describing the husband of the woman that his dad's having an affair with, I was like, oh, is this going to be like one of those weird stories about like how a child is like really sexually attracted to an adult? And luckily it was not. And
like that other story.
and I will say, like, this is and the reason why my mind hopped there is because that's a common trope in like gay fiction of a certain time period, like of the 80s and 90s. It's all about like how some like 11-year-old kid finds like a like 30-year-old man like immensely sexually attractive. And I'm like, God, like, can we write about anything else? Luckily this wasn't that.
Get some fresh content.
But
yeah,
anyways,
didn't go there.
Yeah, didn't go there. And then, but he's even saying like, oh, it's kind of clear to me in retrospect that this dinner was like, my father trying to throw off the scent that he was sleeping with this woman, but like everybody involved kind of knew. Yeah. And then like the husband of the wife that his father's having an affair with.
Mr. Waller.
He's like Waller. The guy that the narrator like lingers on for a second. He's like misbehaving at the dinner, kind of like saying lots of like kind of.
He's like refusing to like eat the
food things,
and he like didn't dress in nice clothes and he like clearly doesn't really want to be there, and which is interesting because it's like there's sort of the sense that like similar to the way the narrator's mom kind of deeply knows that she's being cheated on and she knows what's going on like with this like fake this like dinner for show, the husband of the woman that her husband is cheating on her with is also like kind of doing the same thing, which I thought was really well done.
Yeah, and then they continue to have an affair, and then there's another scene of like going on a, like a house visit where like the wife like isn't wearing anything under her dress
because
and, like,
the dad brings the narrator to these house calls during like, which time he is fucking these women, and he's like, okay, son, go play with XYZ women's children.
And he can like see her pussy.
Yeah, she's wearing like a see-through dress. So he like comes over and he's like a child, and he's like, his dad's like, oh, I'm gonna go give Mrs. Waller her B12 shot for her anemia.
Like, so
and like meanwhile she like steps into the sun in the kitchen, and it's like the sunlight, like it's totally sheer, and she's like not wearing anything underneath.
You can see like, it all.
The narrator's like, oh, that's embarrassing for her. But, of course, he, like, kind of knows what's going on, so he sneaks back in the house. And while he's supposed to be outside playing, and they're grinding. They're boning.
And then, like, the husband of the wife calls the narrator's house, and the mom has, like, a conversation with him. He's like, I'm gonna kill your husband for having sex with my wife. And she's like, what do I fucking care? Like,
she calls his bluff, which is so cunty. She's like, all right, if you're gonna kill him, you don't need me to be involved. And I that was the part where I was like, this is incredible.
Great. Yeah,
this is really
funny. I wish we got more juice.
Yeah,
I wish this was kind of through the perspective of the mother more, so we lingered more on this than him recounting.
Right.
But then I guess this is kind of an imperfect first person narration. Not to get all UIC workshop on us, but like because he is recounting conversations that he was not privy to. So is this imagined, or is this in the world of the story information that he got from his mother?
I'm sorry, I literally like can't even like wah wah. Fuck, all the books in the way. Okay,
What could you
it's like
possibly
marginally
be
better.
like leaf blowing in
I
an
know, I don't
apartment
understand.
complex?
All the pollen up
Yeah.
into my windows is literally what they're doing. Anyway, no, that's, I mean, so that actually was one of my like sort of interests about this story was that, yeah, because it's first person, obviously there's like this sort of question of unreliability. Like it's a story that knows it's being told, right?
Yes.
He's sitting down to tell us a story, and that becomes very apparent early on. What is also interesting on top of that and complicates the matter slightly is that he's reporting these things from, I mean, presumably years and years ago, like
Yeah.
40, 50 years from when he was a child. So there's this like air of kind of like, yes, this is a reconstructed memory, which is in some ways like not necessarily a faithful rendering of what happened, but I don't know, in a way that I really somehow bought. It was like very lifelike. Like, yeah. I think like the sort of goal is like,
I don't think, and
maybe
I don't
it
think
didn't happen
necessarily. Yeah, and now that we were talking through this, like the last kind of few scenes of this story where he like asks his dad directly about the wife that he was fucking in these stories, and the dad on his deathbed is like, I have no clue what you're talking about, and the narrator is like sure that his dad does know what he's talking about, and he's just lying, but like maybe he like truly does not, and like fabricated most of this,
which is what's I think interesting, because it's about like, because memory is so like subjective like that I actually think that adds a really nice touch. And in the interview with Deborah Treisman, he kind of, the author kind of alludes to some of this too, like the you know, the aspect of memory, and of course this wasn't exactly how it happened, but this is lifelike to how it felt at the time.
And that comes through. That we're talking about this, the more this is like climbing up in my like my personal esteem for this writer and his story, because I think actually, yeah, and like the whole thing with the mom like having dementia and losing, you know, the like particularities of her life, but everything kind of being boiled down to a couple like of like poignant things, and then eventually that falling away too. Like I think, yeah, there's a lot of different like, you know, parallel tracks that this story is running on the concept of memory and of like, like
totally, and about like you can't ever really go back to the truth of some past
like
time,
how the emotional reality lives on with you regardless of whether or not you have the actual thing still with you.
Exactly, which is the consolation in my mind. I feel like that's the consolation is the memory itself. Like, and
I will say,
and now this story.
Thank you, Andre Alexis, for I feel like he did this rather subtly. Like he was not hammering this over our head. Yeah, it's so appreciated. It's a story that has a little, you know.
It's one that I think lingers about think there's stuff to dig into after the fact a little bit, you know. You're like, yeah, it wasn't like,
and in that way he gives us a little bit of juice to, you know, kind of tide us over for the first read, but he gives us enough of, you know, other content to sort of dig into through a discussion. So
and the fact that the mom is such a fantastic character, like she's so fucking funny and like great. I'm like, thank you for a nice. And I know it's like very hip and popular to have like unlikable characters. Every character that I write is actually pretty unlikable.
Yeah.
But it's not like the mom is like per se likable as in like, oh, she's like a fantastic person. Because like, you know, we start off by learning that they got into some sort of physical altercation as well. But like, you know, she feels like a real person. And in a way that I feel like sometimes some of these like really like, pared
totally
back
like a mom that, like,
New Yorker stories.
Dementia.
Right. Like these New Yorker stories that are so pared back. And it's like, okay, give us something about this character other than just like having them there as sort of like a frame like that moves around.
I know,
like right, like give us like a real character, and she feels real to me, and
feels real to me as well, and so does the dad.
Yeah, absolutely. Having dated some medical students, like I really related to this so hardcore. I thought this was fantastic.
Have you ever had like sexual fantasies about like a doctor having sex with you during like a checkup or like an appointment?
You know what? No, I like.
You've never had that particular like train of thought, like, wouldn't it be hot if this doctor like started touching on me?
I've had the like meta thought that's like, oh, if I was really into that right now, this would be like crazy. But then I'm always like kind of disgusted by it because I also used to work in a hospital, and I also know well, having worked in a
Yeah,
hospital, I
maybe like
knew a lot of doctors, and there was like not one that I would even give me a pap smear, like
yeah,
let alone
exactly,
like
like
fuck me or something. So
and then like the whole like systemic implications of like your doctor making a pass at you, like maybe I guess this isn't like as hot.
right,
And I feel like it would be like a whole ordeal too, like okay, now we're like in the office and I have to like I don't know, now be a part of this like sexual encounter and like worry about getting caught because that would be like humiliating for me.
right. It's like,
Yeah, like
oh,
I'm
now I
like,
have to
okay,
deal
now
with
we're like in
this.
like this like and also like I am here for like I would like to get like my prescription like
Right,
re-examined.
right.
So
Like,
like,
okay,
like
while you're at it,
we
can
only
you
have
just
so
like,
much time
right,
together.
right,
Like
right, exactly, exactly. Have you ever fantasized about it?
I think as a teenager it was something that I would think about, not necessarily because or like even as an adult, like not necessarily again because it's something that I want to happen, but because the concept of like someone being so like
Right.
moved sexually by your presence that they like have to make this pass at you
Yeah,
is like thrilling in like a validating
I
way
totally
for
agree. That is a good point. I think just the setting, like literally, like that concept, and I've taken some opportunities like that in my past. Were they
you've
ever in a
made a
medical?
pass at someone in a
No,
medical
no,
office.
no. I was about to say, were they in a medical office? No. And secondly, it was more that like a pass was made at me, and by like such
I've
an
never had that
egregious,
happen
like,
to me.
oh, that's like so embarrassing for you that like it's kind of hot. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like,
exactly.
but that's been at like bars or like
Yeah.
like a
I've quite literally
bartender.
never had that experience. I've never had anybody try to make a pass at me ever. There's just something so repugnant about me, I guess.
Well,
Anyways,
same.
so Andre Alexis, I mean overall, where would you rate this story?
This was one of my favorites, actually. Like,
Okay.
I think it could have used a little bit of trimming down. That said, like, I feel like the
Absolutely
meat
agree
of
with
it was
that.
what the meat of it is what carries me forward. I would put this up there with Miss Joyce Carol Oates.
Out of 5 stars, where would you rate it?
I would give this like four stars,
And
four and a
in
half
the
stars.
hierarchy of everything that we've, where does it
I'm
stands?
putting it neck and neck with Miss Joycey.
Hmm.
How about
I
you?
think I am still gonna give this 3 stars. I think yeah, I would put this on par with Neighbors.
Which one was Neighbor? Oh
The
yeah,
first
oh yeah,
one,
yeah, yeah.
and I still feel like last week and Joyce Keller Oates, I like enjoyed more reading.
What was last week's?
The funny one about the supervillain, the kind of like
Oh, that one was actually
the
pretty good
kind of like
too.
twee one.
I think I would put this like this one bumps that
But
one
that's
a
like a
little lower
different
for me, but
thing.
it's
Yeah,
different.
exactly.
They're
Yeah,
hard to compare because they're doing
it's
such
more of a
different stuff.
question of taste for me, and like that's just more in alignment with I don't know
Yeah.
my taste.
I think I was really gagged by this like, jilted woman plot line because
Yeah,
that's happened to me so many times. I'm like, I felt so validated by it.
I'm like so okay. So the other thing I wanted to talk about because I think it's fun where with this podcast when we talk about just like the wider environment of literary fiction using these authors as a jump
Absolutely.
point to discuss more things. Like this concept, like the more I'm looking into literary prizes, because it's always like, in the blurb that the New Yorker will say before introducing an author, or really, on the back cover of any buzzy book, it's always some author that's won so many fucking prizes. And it's
Right.
really like, okay, what do these really entail? What's really the whole
Right.
thing? And
Right.
like this guy has won a lot of prizes that like give a lot of money.
Oh,
Like the
slay.
Wyndham Campbell Prize. Ew, I just like coughed up a big wad of like mucus, sorry. Like is $175,000 that he won.
Oh my god, slay.
And I'm trying to I'm looking at the people who have
Is that
won.
Canadian or US?
No, this one's through Yale.
Oh, slay.
And it's among the richest literary prize amounts in the world, which is another Wikipedia article that I will click.
Oh yeah, bookmark that
But
or
I'm
something.
like, okay, do any of these names ring a bell to you? For this year for fiction, Catherine Scanlon from the United
Oh,
She doesn't even have a Wikipedia article, but
it's
it's not listed the book that she won
Oh.
for. And Deidre Madden. And Ling Ma won this in 2023 last year, which feels,
slay.
I don't know, a little bit anachronistic to give her that award in 2023. It seems like her moment was like
Well, she had that book. She had the
in
short fiction
2020.
come out.
Oh, in 2022, yeah.
So it's
They gave her
that.
they gave her ass $175,000 fucking dollars.
Good for her.
No, but you know what?
I'm jealous.
You know what kind of irritates me about this whole thing is these people are widely published and are widely read and written about by like all the publications. Are everybody's read their books. Their Goodreads pages are like hit up and with tons of reviews of like. What do these people need $175,000 fucking dollars for? I get that the life of a writer is not necessarily one of like resounding financial success, even when you become like a named name in the literary fiction world. But
Right.
it's like, really, do we have to toss him $175,000
Okay.
fucking dollars too? Like, Ling Ma already has a job at U Chicago too. Like, God, how much more can we give this woman? How much more can give me $175,000
I
fucking
know.
dollars?
Wait, okay, so this woman, Catherine Scanlon, she she is perhaps the exception to what you just said. While I agree with literally
Oh,
everything you
she's a
just said,
nobody because she has no
but
Wikipedia article.
something came out 2019, so now she's got between 2019 and 2022. She's put out 3 books, including one collection of short stories, which is actually a pretty quick turnaround to receive a prize in 2023. That's only 4 years. Like,
Cunt.
girl, we could do this, like,
That's true.
give it
And
4 years. Like,
I
we never
absolutely
know.
should, use this as like being motivated by the achievements of others instead of automatically really going on some sort of like angry rant.
No, but it is frustrating when people who are like so established, because it's like a really steep curve, right? It's like it sucks at the bottom so much, and
Yeah,
it's
like
like you get paid
so
like
much.
$20 per book review or whatever, and then it's like suddenly, if you can just get past that first hurdle or whatever, get like one publication with like a
Renee Gladman, do you know these people? But it's all, and that's the thing again with like literary award fiction, like even like the Booker Prize or the Pulitzer, like it's like these are like all books. Again, it's the same thing as like literary humor that we were talking about last week. It seems like award books are even in itself a separate subgenre of literary fiction where
right.
it feels so self-contained. Like I don't know any of these people. Ling Ma, yeah, because she did have a breakthrough on like book talk. But like, it's like award fiction. It's like stuff that like Jewish women in their 50s read.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's like, I mean, because it's like
And it's
commercial literary fiction versus
and
like
it's
small press.
It's earnest and poignant enough where it's like, oh, this deems an award. Like, let's
Right.
give this person an award. And something like truly cunty would never be able to get that sort of thing. Okay,
Right.
Here's a list of the richest
Well, I think you
literary
submit to
prizes.
these, so like, some of these awards, like maybe it's just like a blind, if you write like one good one, I feel like hope is not lost for getting a $175,000 like eventually. I feel like it's not out of reach for us.
So the UAE has a poetry contest where they give $1 million to one poet for a poem. Okay, the Nobel Prize
$1 million? That's crazy.
Yeah, the Nobel Prize is $1 million. I didn't know that.
Oh, wow.
Sweden. Okay, United States. The Dorothy and Lillian Gish Prize.
Okay.
What is this for? To the beauty of the world, mankind enjoyment of life. Is it for fiction? Oh no, it's just for like whoever they choose.
Oh
yeah, these
at
aren't
those
like
top tier, then it's like if you're
and these aren't even for
handpicked,
writers.
like, whatever, then you're just a personality that they're
and again, I come back to the point, like, God, do we really have to toss these people even more money? Like,
right. Spread the wealth.
Truly, truly, truly. Okay, the Lannan Literary Awards for fiction. Let's see, this prize. How much money? It's 150,000. Oh no, 150,000. Let's see who won this one. This hasn't been awarded in fiction since 2021. Deborah Levy. That's familiar, isn't it? Oh, Swimming Home, Hot Milk. That sounds familiar. I guess not. Oh, she's the one who we just saw an interview. I just saw a headline that was like, swimming and writing are inseparable to me.
Slay.
I guess all of her writing is about swimming.
Slay.
Anyways, this is all kind of beside the fact.
Right.
Yeah. I could just be looking at Wikipedia pages for hours. It's not necessarily something that we have to be recording.
That's very true.
Any parting thoughts? Because I think we've been going for like 40 now.
Yeah, I think no, I mean, overall, I thought this was, a nice piece to start my week.
Yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't really hit my vape and move on. It was like, read, hit my vape, think about, maybe come back to, probably will forget about, but like perhaps some lines will stick with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel the same way. I feel compelled to eventually maybe pick up something that he wrote. I guess he has like a series of novels that are like all interconnected.
That makes sense for him. I feel like he's,
exactly.
Kind of
he seems very layered.
Rich, textured.
And he even said in one interview that after completing this cycle of 5 novels. He's like, I'm gonna rewrite and re-release all 5 of these novels again. And I'm
Wait,
like,
that's
you know
kind
what?
of slay.
Good for you. If you
Why
truly
not?
have the
The
bandwidth
bandwidth?
and the resources to
Girl,
do that,
go
people are
for
gonna
it.
let you do it. You might as well do it, girl.
I agree.
Okay.
Slay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for listening. We'll be back next
Thanks.
week. Love you
right.
guys.